What's up, everybody? Well, today, before I make an announcement to this next vacuum that recently joined my vacuum collection, I would like to make a big announcement to changes that are coming to this channel. As a celebration of hitting 2,000 subscribers, believe me, I never thought I would make it that high in the almost 5 years I've been on YouTube. I am going to be launching a brand new video series that I am calling the Restomod, where I pretty much take vacuums, modify them, try to get them up and running, but although they will look a little bit different to how they originally looked when they came out of the factory. But one thing I would like to mention is that these are not going to be just one-time videos where I eventually revert them back to original shape. These are actually going to be legit vacuums that I have rebuilt and made fully working vacuums out of. So how they are and the way I built them is how they're going to stay. And this vacuum is actually one of those exceptions. What I have for your viewing pleasure today is my prototype example of a Kirby Ultimate G3. Now, this is definitely a prototype, and frankly, I'm probably going to do another one eventually, sometime down the road in the near future. But what I have right here for you today is another Kirby G3 that I've had for some time that pretty much originally became a parts unit to use to restore my other G3 to original condition. This one was an unfortunate state of disrepair when I got it. It had a completely trashed motor. It did have a good transmission in it though, which I have installed in the OG G3. Because the original transmission, it was just getting so jittery as it aged. But this one was pretty good. So a lot of the parts I used from this went to the OG G3. And I will eventually make a video on it, not in this video series unfortunately, of how the G3 would look fully restored. But for now, I pretty much include this in the newly developed video series of pretty much how this thing and how I got it to where it is right now. So, as I said, this thing was an unfortunate state of disrepair, but I decided, since it was mostly laying around for parts, and since I have a passion for collecting, fixing, restoring, and occasionally selling vacuums, I decided I gotta do something with this vacuum. So, gathered up a whole lot of parts together and pretty much wasted a whole lot of money to the point that I'm probably not going to get back what exactly this would have been worth. But it was a fun process to go through fixing up one of these and pretty much getting me more experience with Kirby. So, I am going to take a walkthrough of the machine and pretty much go over all the ins and outs I went to how I've got this thing looking almost more modern compared to how the G3 would have looked back in the day. So, let's go ahead and get started. So, it does still have its original handle though, which an unfortunate thing could happen to these as they tend to show their age. The handle kind of starts to yellow towards the top. You guys vote in the comments whether or not you think I should replace this with a later style or a newer G3 shaped handle, or maybe even one from a G3 if I could find one. Or excuse me, an Ultimate G, because the color of the Ultimate G is almost like the off-white of the G3. So even though I restored and modified this, I tried to keep this as original as possible. One of them being this outer bag. This is this original G3 specific outer bag, which has the old style G3 or Generation 3 lettering on the front, which I really like compared to the new replacement that Kirby now sells for these, if you're looking for a replacement outer bag. This one was still in good shape, and it didn't have any major tears in the bag, so I thought this thing still looked pretty usable. So, well, even though it does have this little mark right back here, but that doesn't look too major of a tear. So this thing is still good to be in service, in my opinion. But you will notice I do have the newer style Mini Emptor, which is actually meant for an Ultimate G. I did this mostly because the original Emptor was cracked and busted. It was not the clear style Emptor with the underside bottom tray being clear. So that was kind of a relief, because I would have really wanted a G3 with the clear style Mini Emptor. But for now, I have the upgraded style Emptor for an Ultimate G that's almost agreeable to the color of the G3, and it looks pretty good on it with the original G3 outer bag. And I really do like the lettering on the front of these. This is Generation 3 down on the handle. It says by Kirby, and also on these outer bags, typical Kirby fashion, they are latched in from the top. You can simply remove that to take the handle off, to switch to your hand vac mode. And when you're done, have the handle back on, you can simply just snap it towards the top and pretty much have it back in upright mode. And also, you will notice the cord on this is black. That's because, yes, this does have a replacement cord on it. But unfortunately, due to Kirby being cheap in remanufacturing parts for these, I couldn't even find an Ultimate G cord for this thing. People know the original cords for these are actually off-white, even though as they start to age, they start to get like a mossy green color, which kind of looks hideous. And I do have my OG G3 that has kind of a mossy green faded cord, but it has no exposed wires, so I don't feel the need to replace it just yet. This one actually did, so it prompted me to find a replacement cord. So even though the Ultimate G cord I couldn't find a replacement for that would almost be cosmetically agreeable to this, I've decided, what the heck, to get a 50-foot power cord that Kirby does sell for these. But unfortunately, they only come in this black, which is an unfortunate thing, but I think the extra 18 feet of cord definitely will make up for that. And plus, you pretty much don't even have to stop and switch cord with a cord this massively long. It's pretty much longer than most commercial cords I've seen on commercial vacuums. Plug in once per floor, you're pretty much done with it. But one modification I did have to do to this in order to get this to work is I had to modify the strain relief towards the bottom to get it to fit on the original mounting port for the G3. People know these replacement cords for the older G series before you get into the Centrias. They have a little mounting part that's actually integrated as part of the cord. I actually had to cut off the bottom piece, and then I zip tied this to the original mounting position for the G3. A lot of people are probably not going to be happy with the way I ran this on the outside, where I could have just ran it underneath and zip tied it from the inside. But it's not a major deal, and it still serves its purpose. I might have to rotate the zip tie so it doesn't nick any part of the outer bag one of these days. But it works pretty good for what it is. Also, another thing I would like to point out is the bottom part of the cord. This cover is actually not original. I actually got this as an eBay part because I thought this original piece was missing from the factory. But little did I know that some of these early model G3s did not come with this little plug cover. In fact, this one, I don't know if it's kind of hard to see, but it doesn't have the screw hole to securely mount this in place. So it's kind of just dangling where it is, but it still does a decent good job of covering up this part of the plug. So I got no issues with it. You could drill and tap a hole for a screw to securely mount it in place, but I haven't done that right now. But the cord doesn't seem to come out, so I'm not too particularly worried about that. So, other things that I've done to this vacuum to bring it up to modern day standards and running it like new again is the motor and transmission in this are brand spanking new. When I got this, the original motor in this was severely damaged. It was running like garbage, it sounded off balance, and it pretty much just like rattled and shook the entire vacuum and had a bad vibration problem. So unfortunately this thing was going to need a motor in order for it to run again. So the motor I have in this is unfortunately not a brand new motor, but it is in fact a new rebuilt motor. But it is a later spec motor, I do believe, because this does sound a little bit different than my OG G3, and it does seem to make a lot more power than the original motor that would have came in this. So, also another thing that I did was I installed a newer style belt lifter on the front. I mostly did this on purpose, particularly because I wanted to know what these G3s would look like with a newer style belt lifter. I do have the original one with me, but I mostly wanted to do this for looks, since I was going with a more modern look and it already had the new style mTOR and a replacement cord on it. Further to that, the sticker cover on the front of this new style G5, G6 style belt lifter, that's the same off-white to match the color of the G3, the sticker cover, for whatever reason, which I think was meant to be for the G4 in the first place, actually matches the same color as the cord. So it kinda contrasts to that. But one thing to like about this, it's got the new style arm to make getting the belt off the motor shaft a lot easier. So simply do that and unlatch the top to simply get the nozzle right off and get the belt off the shaft. Fortunately, this mess of hair I do got pick out of that. Fortunate thing to happen to these is hair likes to wrap around the belt and especially around the motor shaft, which this does have a brand new motor shaft as well as a brand new white plastic A-modal fan, which is probably gonna confuse a lot of people because people will think, no, this is a Lexan fan. Well, little did you know, the original gray plastic fans that came in this that were very weak and not very structurally built well and had a lot of issues breaking, which probably was what took the original motor of this thing in the first place, was also made out of Lexan. But it was a thinner material than the current Lexan they used. A lot of Kirby enthusiasts have pretty much dubbed this the A-modal fan and has a different plastic material than the original gray plastic Lexan fan. And I do believe these fans are much more durable than the gray plastic fans ever will be. And I still have a couple other Kirby's that still have the gray plastic fan that I need to replace the fan in them ASAP, but I digress. These fans are a lot more stronger. If you have a Kirby with a gray plastic fan, replace it immediately. You'll thank yourself in the end, and your Kirby will run a lot a lot stronger, and it will definitely be more durable in case you were to suck up the wrong thing, which I don't recommend doing that, but be more vigilant with what you vacuum up with this thing because it's a direct air. Also, one thing I would like to mention is, yeah, the brush roll in this is a brand new brush roll. It is a chevron replacement specific for the G3 and G4. It does have pretty soft bristles on it that do groom the carpet pretty well. It agitates very good, even for being a soft bristle brush roll. I'm thinking it's supposed to be because it's almost entirely straight. That way it creates good agitation. And they do have a chevron pattern, so it pretty much funnels everything into the center suction path. This brush roll, I do believe, however, may be defective from the factory, because if you look, this part right here, where normally a little cap is supposed to sit over the top, is completely missing on this brush roll. So when it picks up against the little magnet inside there for the brush roll performance indicator, it doesn't really light up that well. I don't know why that is, but I do believe it probably has to be because the cap on the top here is probably missing. So, not a major deal, but I still keep the brush roll in because it is still a brand new brush roll that performs amazing, but I may have to find another replacement to see if that was the issue all along. And if that's the case, then I'll probably throw this brush roll in my OG G3. Also, you can get access to your bottom plate right there by removing these locks to get the bottom part off, like that. And that's how you get access to change out your brush roll. And believe me, this is not going to be fun to put back on camera. I'm probably going to have a bit of an argument getting this back on. Okay, lock that side. All right, there we are. I did keep the original bumper in this, but it is unfortunately not in very good shape, and the red stripe is missing, but it kind of goes good, being that it has an upgraded style everything. You guys vote in the comments whether or not I should change this. But for now, let's go ahead and try and get this guy back in. So just pretty much loop the belt around here. You want to line up the belt shaft right in the middle, so that way when you put the belt back on, it lines up around the motor shaft. So let's go ahead and reinstall the floor nozzle. I want to make sure it's lined up correctly, and that it depresses this little speed selector switch on the bottom, which this one puts it at low speed. The upper one does it on high speed for tool suction. And unfortunately, the trim piece around the speed selector switch is missing. I will have to try and find a replacement for it, but for right now, it works okay for the time being. And I'll just go ahead and put this floor nozzle back in place. Come on, line it up right. Latch it down. Loop the belt around the pulley. And there you go. I also like to turn the brush roll a few times to make sure the belt grabs onto the motor shaft. And we're pretty good. And another thing that I did to make this thing look a bit more modern, the handle spring assembly was broken when I got this, which most people know on these G3s you have an outside lever that controls whether or not the handle goes down about 2/3 of the way, or when you push it back in, it lies totally flat. For these newer style ones, which this one I think was actually sourced off of Centria, has the center style selector switch, so when you have it set to the right, it'll only go down 2/3 of the way to allow for transport over floor thresholds. And right down the middle, it'll lie totally flat so you can get under furniture. Even though Kirby's do have, unfortunately, a pretty high profile, especially with the bag on them. But you also do have a left position that you can put, and the handle will lock in the totally flat position, so that way you can store it up in your closet like so, so it'll not take as much space. I like to leave it in the middle so it lies totally flat and moves freely. It does have some good spring tension. Another thing I might look into replacing is this vent, which is, unfortunately, does have some burn marks on it from where the original motor died. So, yeah, now that's probably going to be looked into replacement. The carpet height adjustment knob works pretty good. As many people know, these Kirbys, they have it mounted at your foot, and it ratchets pretty good. It doesn't, the metal's not super worn that it just drops all the way to the carpet, which that is a sign that these would need to be replaced. And speaking of replaced, this also does have a brand new transmission in it. But I went through the trouble to retain the original drive selector switch specific for the G3. And I also did use the original hubcaps. However, the right one is actually not original, which this one's also for an Ultimate G, similar to what I got the new style Mini M-Tour from. The original hubcap on the left is the original G3 color, which I decided to put it over on the left side since it's more exposed than the right side, being that it's mostly covered up by the outer bag. But like I said, it's got a brand new transmission with new style, or excuse me, I retained the old style drive selector switch, which I honestly think is much more better built compared to the ones by today's standards. The newer one would be a two-piece design and not one piece like this. The original replacement they had specific for the G3s had a gray piece right over here, and then the drive selector side of things would have been green, similar to like this. But unfortunately, Kirby being cheap in reproduction parts caused them to pretty much use this as the replacement drive selector switch, which I think is the stupidest thing they could have done. Because this may look better on a G4, but however, the color scheme was originally meant to be for a G6, which makes sense because the yellow part in the drive doesn't match up with the color scheme of the G3. In fact, I would have liked it a little bit better if it was red, like, even though it was meant to be for an Avalier 2. Or excuse me, Avalier 1 is the red one. The Avalier 2 is blue. What am I thinking? Can't talk straight. But anyway, G6 drive selector wheel didn't look good on this, so I decided to reuse the original one it came with. I would have been okay if it was an Avalier 1 with the red, since it would kind of match the red coloring, or the red markings on the lettering on the front. But even though the black plate would kind of look out of place, so that's why I went with the original. But I digress. Down here is the model tag right here. It's the model G3D, 120 volts, 50/60 hertz. It's a 7 amp motor. If anyone forgets how much amperage these Kirby motors are, it's made for the Kirby Company of Cleveland, Ohio, for household use only. Made under one or more USA patents. And there's all the patents if anyone cares anything about that. So, one more thing I would like to point out is the bag in this. Since this does have the new style M-Tour, it does have the upgraded crush-proof fill tube. And It also does have a later style fill neck, which solves some of the early problems with the G6 where the bag tend to blow off on the back, so it locks more securely in place. This does have the new style universal fit, so it can even fit an F-style collar, which you can run an F-style collar if you need to find a replacement fill tube for one of these older G3s. They will fit right in place. You just would have to replace the zip ties that hold it to the fill tube. Let me see. Oh, and right here is where the model tag is stamped into the aluminum housing. If I'm not mistaken, if I'm reading this correctly, this is made in June of 1990, so it's definitely an early style G3, but unfortunately not new enough to have the clear style mTOR or the vertical vents with a little exhaust filter. So, with that said, I've pretty much yammered on entirely about the build history and the launching of this new video series. So let's get to the part that you guys have been waiting impatiently to see, or probably have skipped up to by this time. If you guys stick around at this point, then good for you. Now let's go ahead and release the extremely long 50-foot power cord, which is ridiculous. It's unfortunate that they don't have a gray replacement cord for it, because Kirby is cheap in reproduction parts. And even the replacement cords that are gray or white that you could find cost ridiculous amounts. And yeah, the black cords definitely don't look cosmetically matching to the G3, but for me, the extra 18 feet of length makes up for that. So now let's go ahead and plug this guy in and get to the turning on and running of this thing. So, typical Kirby fashion, your power switch and everything is down at your foot. That's just how smooth this thing runs. And also you will notice I have upgraded the headlight to be an LED, so it almost is like a Centria, even though it's still a G3 headlight cap. So, other than that, let's go ahead and get this thing up and running. Go ahead and adjust the carpet pile. Goes completely off. It's just a little nuisance, but the brush roll still works fine irregardless. So now let's go ahead and switch on the tech drive. And away we go. Listen to how quiet that transmission is. You can barely hear it. Which is one nice thing about these newer replacement transmissions. Mostly has to do with the gear ratio. I think you could pretty much put the new style gears onto an old transmission and it would run about as quiet as this. Even though it doesn't push as well as the old style gears would in the original transmission, it still works pretty good. It's pretty much like a natural pushing force. I think that's what Kirby was going for when they updated the transmissions. very smooth. Definitely is a much better cleaner now that all that work's been put into it. And if you guys want a good idea of how long the cord is, that is how much I have left. And I barely even made it to the other side of the room, which is just how much of an upgrade this extra length of cord is. So for demonstrational purposes, what, you didn't think I would end the video after showing this thing running, did you? No. Gotta demonstrate this thing in tool mode. So for right now, I got all the tools right here for my Ultimate G Diamond Edition, which is what I use pretty much for all my G series since it's compatible. So I'm going to pretty much use this thing in tool mode and pretty much show you all the tools that Kirby's have come with over the years. So for now, let's go ahead and take the belt off and floor brush off. And let's go ahead and attach the hose. And attach it to the front. As you see, it does depress the top switch right here. And let's lock this guy down. And now this thing is in tool mode. The motor will run at a higher speed to pretty much compensate for the low suction that these direct air motors are pretty known to produce. It's still not fantastic compared to most other vacuums on the market, but pretty good for what it is, although it is unfortunately pretty loud. So let's go ahead and get to some of the attachments. You have 2 extension wands, crevice tool, horsehair dusting brush, a mattress tool, and a little one that you can attach at the end that has a little suction relief valve. Bunch of other stuff I can't really demonstrate that well on camera. But for now, let's go ahead and show you 2 extension wands right here. This is how long of a reach you get with these guys. You do have a bare floor cleaning tool. See that you can pretty much attach it right to here. You pretty much use the bare floor tool for cleaning low pile area rugs. It can work on carpets too, as you'll see here. But it's best for bare floors and low pile area rugs. Your dusting brush right here. Upholstery tool. You also do have your crevice tool. And lastly, we'll go ahead and disconnect this, the mattress tool, which also can be used as a larger upholstery tool if necessary. You also do have this little section that right here. Like I said, this is better used for mattress pickup. Guess it's not really good for an upholstery tool. but you kind of get the idea. Lastly, let me go ahead and show you this little zip brush. This is actually a pretty unique tool to clean bare floors, or excuse me, actually clean pet hair off upholstery at carpeted stairs. Thinking of cleaning bare floors, one of these. But anyway, just look how well engineered this zip brush is. I never seen a turbo tool take this long to spin down. So Kirby must have done something really amazing with the building of all these tools. So let's go ahead and put everything back in its tool holder. Also, you have this little section right here, which is a section you could actually mount to the front of the cleaner. And let's see if I can do this right on camera. And pretty much it's a suction port where you can essentially use the vacuum as a blower. And let me see if I can't attach this thing right on camera. So you pretty much hook the hose and lock the little locking tab in place, and it's now a blower. Yeah, look at how much airflow this thing produces. Pretty interesting. Kirby has definitely done a lot of things to these vacuums over the years. I will credit them for being a vacuum that looks like it came out of a whole different century, and they made it pretty versatile. And also, lastly, let me go ahead and put everything back on in its place. Come on. Belt in place. Nozzle lock. Loop the belt around the motor shaft. Give it a turn or two. And let's go ahead and reconnect the bag. But one last thing I will show is the handbag attachment. Pretty much you have to detach the rest of the cord off the handle, but pretty much what you would do is attach this little part to the end of right here, pretty much loop the outer bag around to the front here, and now you can use this as a hand vac, although it's pretty cumbersome to do since this thing is really heavy, so not too many people will use this. So, but it's a pretty convenient thing to have. Now let's go ahead and put everything back to the top. And just like that. Well, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this whole entire video of my Restomod Kirby G3, and to kickstart this brand new series. There will be a lot of other vacuums to come in this video series. If they don't look as original as can be, I'll post them in this. if they don't get reverted back to original, they will stay in this file. So, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Be sure and stay tuned, and don't forget to like, rate, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.